It's hard to pinpoint exactly what caused a fashion trend to plunge in popularity. Many of these trends cycle back around into the mainstream after they make an exit. Some items are pushed in popularity due to specific communities. There is no denying that the Black community has a record of being trendsetters in regards to fashion. One item made popular by the Black community I'm going to discuss today is the bucket hat. A hat that wasn't so fashionable at one point. The bucket hat was originally an item of practicality rather than a fashion accessory used in the early 1900s by Irish fishermen and farmers. They later became of use for U.S. soldiers during the Vietnam War and were referred to as Bonnie hats. According to HatsUnlimited.com, these hats were most often comprised of cotton, twill, polyester, or canvas. The hats had a wide brim that could be easily rolled up, and they featured a chin strap, a flat crown top, and they sometimes had sewn-in loops to stow small pieces of gear. The hat later found itself on the head of a different audience. Paraphrasing what was said on thetempest.com, bucket hats momentarily became popular with women in the mod subculture of fashion by the 1960s. To fit into the aesthetic, the hats include stiffer, elegant, and long-brim versions. I have even found pictures of the famous Audrey Hepburn sporting versions of the hat. The hat was still not saturated into the mainstream, however, until a few decades later. Many credit the first appearance of the bucket hat in the hip-hop community to when Sugar Hill Gang's Big Bang Hank wore one during their performance of Rapper's Delight in 1979. Moving into the 80s, we see that the hat began to gain steam within hip-hop. You could not discuss the bucket hat without discussing LL Cool J. The rapper basically became synonymous with the hat when he wore a red Kangol hat during the release of his album Radio in 1985. There are so many pictures of the rapper wearing variations of the bucket hat, and he even sported them on some of his album covers. At the same time in the 80s, bucket hats could also be spotted on the heads of hip-hop collective RUN-DMC, along with their famous Adidas attire. Throughout the 90s and into the 2000s, we continued to see bucket hats on the head of Black celebrities such as Jay-Z, Rakim, Eric B., MC Sean, Aaliyah, Missy Elliott, and others, including some outside of music. With the assistance of media that wasn't present in the past, the bucket hat's entrance into the Black fashion space is what allowed it to become a notable fashion accessory inside and outside of the community. Bucket hats have come back in style in the past few years. I would say they made their comeback starting around 2018. We were even beginning to find them on the runways around this time. Why is this? Well, if you look into the past, you might find clothes that resemble something you would see today. Fashion cycles through our culture, and as of the later half of the 2010s, we've seen the 80s and 90s come back into style, along with the 2000s in more recent years. This can explain why the bucket hat has made a return. Social media also has aided with sharing information and new ideas. Celebrities or people who are loved within fashion spaces also play a big role. As an example, I have found pictures of Rihanna sporting the hat years before the trend really made a comeback. As I'm sure you know, Rihanna is considered a fashion icon, so she could have definitely inspired others to pick up the hat. I personally took a liking to the hat when I saw it worn by Tyler the Creator, who I would also say is regarded or will be in the future as a fashion icon. I believe that bucket hats will be around for a while, since the 90s and the 2000s are still popular, and they come in many different styles. However, I also believe that eventually its popularity will calm down, and we might just see it worn by those who genuinely gravitate to the accessory. The history behind a hat that was originally worn during not-so-fashionable affairs may seem irrelevant. However, the bucket hat's past is a small yet relevant part of the conversation around Black culture. You see, the reason I want to make this video was to highlight one example of how Black culture has made an influence outside of the community. It is often that Black people are not given credit for things that we have created or popularized, so I want to give that credit here. As a final note for the Black community, it is always good to learn something new about our history, even if it is just a hat.